If you go back to the very first videos I ever put onto YouTube to start off this channel, it was a playthrough of a game called Ballance, and that was a rollerball through 3D mazes and see if you can get from A to B without falling off too much and breaking the marble or causing yourself problems. And here we are in 2024 reviewing a game that still feels very much inspired by that cult classic. AtmaSphere 2 is a sequel to AtmaSphere, which came out a couple of years ago now, and it's the same type of premise. You are rolling a massive ball bearing from A to B across various different stages, this time held inside a medieval, frosty, alpine style castle environment. There's a lot of snow effects, everything is covered in ice, but don't pay too much attention to that because your ball is way grippier than you think it is, and gravity doesn't necessarily apply as you'd initially think. Some kind of physics 3D platformer around rolling a ball bearing around a maze would necessarily play out, and I'll get onto that in a second. There's about 45-ish levels in total, split across 4 difficulty levels, and you can die and need to respawn back at the beginning. And you can be like put into a game over state, but the game is very generous with the lives that it gives you. You can die a couple of ways. The first way is to just fall off the environment and fall into the snowy depths below, and you'll be doing that very, very often, and I'll explain why. There's a perspective issue. As you move around from A to B, the ball bearing is fatter than you think it initially is the game's giving you credit for, and I did find that I was lining up my perspectives slightly off kilter, and I would quite often be grazing things that I thought were further back in the in the screen than what they actually are, and so I'd be going and hitting like spikes or rotating saws or something that's kind of spinning around, and it would just catch me at the edge and send me off, and then when I'd be running up to do like a little jump, I'd be like, now I'm off trajectory, and then fall into the abyss. And that's kind of how you can die in one way. The other way is that your ball can also gain damage over time. And so if you keep hitting various different saws or spikes or swingy traps, or if you're getting pummeled by massive cannonballs flying about everywhere, eventually your marble will just shatter, and that will again send you back to the beginning of the level to go again. However, at checkpoints, you do get quite a lot of lives, and the game is quite generous, especially as you're trying to learn kind of what's coming up ahead as you go from checkpoint to checkpoint to get to the end of the level. Each level gives you 5 goals to get towards. There's a 1, 2 or 3 star time attack approach, which will take you some getting used to. It's very generous in the early levels, but it gets quite strict later on. And then there are lots of coins for you to collect, and you'll get a kind of extra emblem for doing that. And there's various vases dotted around the level, which will contain coins too. And if you smash all of those, you'll get a 5th emblem. So, lots of things for you to do. That does give a lot of replayability because this game is hard. And the other thing I'd say is that all of those coins that you're getting allows you to then unlock 62 different skins for your marble. Doesn't affect any of the handling whatsoever, but it's nice to dress up for the occasion and try out all of the different funky designs that the game has to offer. Now, for a physics game, AtmaSphere 2 has a weird approach to physics, and it took me a while to get used to. If you're rolling up a hill and you stop moving forward, you don't roll back down. You just stay where you are, and it's grippy. And that's why I was saying pay no attention to the snowy environment. It doesn't really matter, it's just an aesthetic choice. Instead, your ball is grippy and almost like it's got a magnet on the floor to its bum. So it does require a little bit of momentum to get up and running, and that becomes really, really crucial later in levels where you're trying to hop, skip and jump over things, and your jump that you've got can be pressed quickly in succession for a double jump, and that can be very, very helpful and almost required from the kind of early hard levels onwards to get right. And so quite often you'll be kind of chaining up jumps, but also trying to land from really narrow platforms to another. They might be spinning round at the same time, or they might have circular saws or massive cannonballs firing about that you need to time to as well. Or it might just be putting a lot of furniture and smashed vases and wooden box debris everywhere that you're trying to have to ram your way through whilst also not pushing yourself off the level. And whilst you are the strongest thing in the game, apart from the saws that will kind of fire you off somewhere else, there is momentum behind what you do. It's just it stops flat when you stop moving in unexpected ways that don't make sense with the terrain around you. Once you get used to that though, you start to see that actually this is kind of a bit of a blessing, because it allows you to time jumps or time moving in between, move it upping and lowering platforms, for example, and things like that. So it does have its benefits. It just takes a little while to kind of get into the right headspace for it, I guess. Now, whilst the physics are definitely an acquired taste, although I found myself getting quite comfortable with them the longer that I played, the camera work in this game does have some issues. The game does come with camera controls, but for some reason they barely ever worked with me. And if camera controls only work at certain periods in a level, I can't for the life of me work out what triggers it and what doesn't. Because in theory you can move around the camera with the mouse or with the right analog stick if you're using a controller. Very rarely did it work, and then occasionally when it did, I found it exceptionally useful, but it didn't really seem to work very often, so I'm super confused about that. The reason why that causes issues is that this game has a really nasty penchant for putting furniture like wooden boxes or wooden barrels slightly further forward than like a big row of them just before you go for a jump. And so when I go back to that kind of perspective shifting of sometimes you'd kind of over-egg things, or you'd see things that you think are further in the background are actually further forward in reality, this is where that problem comes in, because you'll go to roll to do a big jump, not realising you've caught the very edge of a wooden box, and that will nudge you off trajectory, and then you'll fall into the abyss, never to be seen again until you respawn at the checkpoint. And I had this happen to me hundreds of times, and it really kind of elongated the playthrough, but I started to get quite annoyed at this kind of slippery, sly little trick to try and make the game much harder. Those niggles aside though, I did enjoy my time with that AtmaSphere 2. I enjoyed the original, I bought that several years ago, and this one is an improvement and it's a bit more polished than the original. Is it quite the top tier ball mazing game? Perhaps not, but it's not too far down below that, and if you are interested in rollerball style maze platformers, this is well worth one to pop onto your wish list to pick up at a later point, especially once they've probably lined out some of the bugs. I did have a couple of points where this game crashed to desktop for me and I didn't really understand why, and it wasn't consistent as to why either. So yeah, keep this one on your wish list for the time being, let some of the stuff iron out, and I think you'll have a little mini indie niche gem on your hands in the future. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/Higher Plane Network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.